item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups may be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way of providing public comment. And with that, I call the meeting of October 25th, 2022 to order. And Carrie, may we please have the roll call?
Absolutely. Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Fritz.
Here.
Vice Chair Fernandez.
Here.
And Chair Ottinger.
Here.
And we have a full complement tonight.
Good. At this time, we can take public comments from the public for items that are not on our agenda tonight. Is anyone wishing to speak? Please raise your hand, virtual or otherwise. Now, I'm not seeing anyone. Are you, Carrie?
I do not, and we have not received any comments from the public for items not on your agenda.
Okay, thank you. Are there any statements of conflict of interest from any planning commissioner tonight? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to the approval of the Planning Commission minutes of the June 14th meeting. Does anyone have any edits? Commissioner Fritz.
Thanks. On page 4, this is Carrie's comment at the top of the page. I'm not sure what it's supposed to say. It says that is the hot monk at the regular music venue and the events under the Barlow. I'm not sure what the under the Barlow is supposed to be referring to.
Sorry, I was muted. So there were two stages that weren't under consideration. Oh, thank you. The two pieces of it that weren't part of the use permit, one was the Hot Monk, which has a regular permit, regular music venue, and the event space at the Barlow, which also has a, that should just say the event center.
Oh, maybe it's thought center was under.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Event
Okay.
center at the Barlow. So thank you. We will correct that to say, and the event center at the Barlow.
Okay, that makes more sense. That's all I had. Thanks.
Yep.
Vice Chair Fernandez?
Yes. At the bottom of page 5, Carrie, your comments there said that I think we should actually include that in the rules, but I'm not going to put it down here as well. Or did you mean that I am going to put it down here as well?
What line is this? Sorry, I'm
So
looking
page
at the bottom of
5.
Page 5.
Yeah,
The one
bottom
that says
page.
I counted very quickly.
Yeah, your comment on page 5. Should that be? But I am going to put it down here as well, or should instead of I'm not going to put it down here as well?
I'm not seeing that.
I'm not seeing that. Are you sure
Okay,
it's page 5?
Hang on a second. You know what? Sorry, I just lost my file. Boy, technical difficulties today, aren't we?
That earthquake.
Yeah, it wasn't anything significant. So yeah, it's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Are there any other suggested edits to the minutes?
We'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of what was this, June June 9th, no, wait, June
14.
14th,
June 14th.
2022.
Yep.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. It's been moved in second that we approve the minutes with the one edit on page 4. And Carrie, you should call the roll for this too, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly. Commissioner Kelly, you're muted. There you go.
I go again with that heavy finger on the mute. Yes, aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Fritz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fernandez,
Aye.
and Chair Ottinger.
Yes.
Thank you. Those are now approved.
Okay, now we move on to public hearing, item 5A, which is the Punch Down Alcohol Use Permit. And I believe Associate Planner John Jay is going to introduce that to us tonight.
That's correct. Thank you. So the project tonight here is proposed to occupy a 1,065 square foot space to open a retail wine shop and tasting bar, the Punch Down, selling natural wines and food provisions. This application requires a alcohol conditional use permit as it plans to serve alcohol on site as a alcoholic beverage tasting establishment or bar. As noted within the zoning ordinance, as this facility does not have a bona fide kitchen, it cannot be approved at a staff level and requires the review and approval from the Planning Commission. The Punch Down is a retail wine shop consisting of a small area cafe seating and a small bar area for wine tasting. The proposed unit was formerly the Nectary, which produced and sold beverage and food products, as well as had a consumption of these on site. They were non-alcoholic, however. The proposed hours of operation are Sunday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Friday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Employees will be required to be certified and trained under the California Responsible Beverage Service Training, as well as lead training through the ABC, and that reserves the right to refuse service to any patron. As mentioned earlier, the location is within the Barlow, next door to the Redbird Bakery and Acre Pizza, which will offer food provisions for the tasting room. The surrounding uses are all commercial, industrial, which allow for bars and other alcoholic beverage tasting facilities with an approved use permit. Staff wanted to mention that we are recommending an additional parking space be required for this use, as it is more intense than the previous use. However, the Barlow does have enough overflow parking to accommodate this, and that additional parking space is also within the recommended approval letter, or conditions of approval, sorry. The last thing that I wanted to mention was that there is a condition within the alcohol use permit section of the code that speaks to over concentration within an area. The Planning Commission has considered a number of these alcohol use permits within the Barlow, and staff feels that there is beginning to have an over concentration amount of wine bar and tasting rooms. We do understand that restaurants do have the right to serve alcohol as a accessory sale to the restaurant, but wine bars and tasting rooms in general should be looked at a little bit more further. With that, I included a map of the Barlow that labels out the locations of these wine bars and taverns, and also some of the restaurants located within the Barlow for a visual representation of that. The planning department did not receive any public comments on this agenda item, and I do have the applicant TC Looney here to provide a brief presentation and is available for any comments that you may have. And that'll do it for me. Thanks.
Hi there, I'm
Okay,
DC.
thank you. Normally, we would have allowed our planning commission to ask questions of staff at this point, and then the applicant will be next. So do any members of the planning commission have questions of staff? I see Commissioner Fritz has his hand up.
Thanks. I had a question about the findings. It's Exhibit A. Sorry, I don't have the page here. It's page
7?
page 7. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, do we need finding number 2? Because finding number 3 and finding number 4 kind of say what finding number 2 says. You know, references sections of the zoning code that have to be followed. Anyway, it just seemed like we might be able to just get rid of that. Is that possible, staff? Is there any reason why the condition 2 has to be there?
I think we can get rid of it. It just is kind of a layout of the specific code sections that the findings are referencing, and then it's a more in-depth explanation of those code sections. But if you're, I'm fine either way of either removing them or keeping them.
Okay, it just sort of seemed redundant to have it kind of in there twice, but I just was wondering if there's a technical reason why they need to be in there twice.
So the, so for a general conditional use permit, it's the item 4 is the only,
Mhm.
finding for it. Alcohol use permits do have additional findings. It doesn't hurt, these are additional findings, and if we have had some recent alcohol permits that were a lot more contentious, and in that case, these findings were used pretty specifically for that one. So technically, they should be used, even though they may seem a little redundant.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to the, I think they should be in there. Just the item number 2 just references the alcohol use permit conditions and in A,
Oh,
and then B
yes.
says the conditional use conditions, but then we say item 3, this is the alcohol use permit condition.
thank you. I see. Yes,
That's
so
the-
yes,
that's-
item 2 is extraneous. It's simply.
Okay, that's what,
yeah,
that was
yeah.
my question was,
Thank you.
we could strike that. I also had a question, the staff report, it kind of references all of the, various alcohol licenses that are in the city. And it says, is this alcohol license is gonna be a type 42? So is this gonna be the only type 42 license in the city? Because there were no other, there's none on the list currently, which I was surprised at. That list that's at the end of the report.
What page is that?
That's the very last page.
Okay, thank you.
So it has all the license types, and it shows that there's 37 type 41, but there's 0 type 42. Anyway, I just found that surprising.
Yeah, that information was pulled from ABC's website for our jurisdiction, so I'm not sure if most people fall under the 41 category.
And again, can we explain the difference between 41 and 42?
Yeah, there is a difference between the two. 41 is geared towards a restaurant, and 42 is geared towards a bar/tavern.
Okay. And I just kind of clarifying this in terms of the discussion of over concentration of,
Mhm.
things, and I'm just trying to understand what the different types are.
Yeah, and so for that, I'm not sure. We definitely, I think John and I spoke about this, and we do have other bars in town.
Yeah,
We have the Main Street Saloon, we have Third Pig and Jasper's that are
Yeah.
specifically bars, and they would generally have a type 42 license.
yeah, and it even seems like, went the Crooked Goat and, those
Golden State Cider and.
Golden State
Wood-
Cider
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and the arcade bar that we just approved. It seems like those would. I mean, I'm just trying to kind of clarify, and it looks like DC may have some comment. Maybe he can answer when he gets to his turn. When you get to your turn, you can weigh in on that. And that is all my staff questions. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Fernandez.
Yeah, I saw that you got city department comments. Was there any comments or records of any problems with the that area? Was there any particular with alcohol permits or that had been a problem?
Nothing specific from I would assume you're probably speaking to the either police or fire department as far as complaints and stuff like that go.
Yeah, or staff, yeah.
We haven't gotten any, there were no reports that were a part of this staff report from the police or fire department in regards to over concentration. But like I said, it is one of the findings that we do need to make, and to that list there are there's becoming more and more within that area, even though there haven't been any complaints about over concentration or alcohol related incidents yet. I think we should be proactive about it instead of reactive.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Burns.
I think my question was actually answered. Thank you so much.
And I have a question that's kind of similar to that, because when I read that language, I think the only thing that really concerns me here is the discouragement of more desirable and needed commercial uses other than alcohol. And I'm not sure that in this particular area, I mean, it does seem to be what's happening, and it seems to be that most of these people are renters. They're not buying a property and doing something on their own. They're kind of getting approval from the person who's renting to them for this purpose. So I just think it's something to keep in mind as we make decisions. And I don't know whether, because that is the case, it needs to be something that we look at when it's in the Barlow. I mean, I don't mind seeing it there, but would it, is it appropriate to keep covering it every single time when we're not really looking at a traffic issue related to the sale? Because, well, we have traffic issues, but it's not related to that. There aren't children on the way to school. There aren't shoppers that are being offended because of the liquor store. And we don't really have a lot of vandalism that the Barlow doesn't take care of, and it's not disturbing the peace. So I think the real issue that we're looking here is it just the discouragement of other and needed commercial uses. So that's not something we can really decide if the owner in the Barlow is coming up with this. I don't know whether we can exclude the Barlow from this issue. Would staff agree that this is the main reason we're looking at this?
So I think it is generally related to the number, the concentration, the number of uses in a single area. Is that becoming like a bar district? Is that what the city wants it to be? Is that going to cause disturbances? And I'm not saying we're there yet or not. That's actually, one of the things we bring up for your review. I believe we are starting to get to the point where ABC is requiring us to do letters because of the potential overconcentration. It's higher than it's reached that threshold. So that's sort of another metric and a reason to put this in here. And it may be that this is fine, the next 3 are fine, but the next 3 after that, what level is that? And so that's kind of, since it's one of our criteria, it is something that is part of the use permit. And at some point, Sonoma even put a moratorium on tasting rooms but it was sort of too late at that point. And so this is kind of there to make sure that we're looking at this consciously through time. And not kind of having to backtrack and say, whoa, we've gone too far.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing about the ABC beginning to want to see a letter, because that tells me they're concerned too. And they
I
may not.
actually do have a question, Kathy.
Okay, Commissioner Burns, we'll come back to you.
Sorry, thanks. When the Barlow was first, there, I remember at the time that there was allocation of businesses where they could only have a certain percentage that weren't, it was actually manufacturing, and they could only have a certain percentage that were retails or other things. And I'm wondering, if this is old information, if that's been reallocated. The reason I know is because as a business owner, the owner of the Barlow came to us and wanted my business there because we manufacture and sell retail. So we were a sweet spot for them that we could take a manufacturing license, but yet also sell retail. So is that still the truth, that they have to meet that guideline of manufacturing versus retail versus everything else, or is that not on the table anymore?
There are, John, do you want me to field this one? Because I probably have more institutional memory on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, that's
Sorry, I didn't want to step on your toes.
way over my head, so.
And my history is also a little bit limited, but yes, the Barlow was originally proposed as a manufacturing maker space where people would also be doing retail of the things that they were doing that. In terms of, and some of those uses that are there now aren't quite along those lines. Golden State Cider has a tasting room, but their manufacturing are still out of town, but it is a local place for, the manufacturing is still local. And that required a use permit, so that required review. The component of it that is a little bit more restricted is the retail and the retail in the office. So the council, when they adopted, because I know the Barlow had requested the office be changed to be allowed. Council specifically did not want office other than second floor. And part of that is that, there was enough office space in downtown and other areas of town. This is a commercial manufacturing district. The intent of the district to maintain that is not for it to, be opened up to any commercial district. It's an industrial land use. And it floods, and it's got other issues for that. For the retail component of it, there are some requirements in that the retail is permitted where the uses are 1,500 square feet or less, so it's limited to a smaller square footage. And the use is located in a footprint or existing space that existed as retail in August 2018 when the code was adopted. So yes, new existing industrial warehouse and manufacturing spaces are restricted from being converted into retail or other non-permitted uses.
Just to clarify, their usage fits within the current logistics of what you can do at the Barlow. Is that accurate?
For this particular use.
Okay.
Yeah. The past use was
The nectar.
retail. Yeah, the nectary resident. So this is actually pretty similar to that, just with alcohol instead of.
So any food or wine was within the Barlow's ability to, that there was no restrictions on that.
Correct. Restaurants are an allowed use in that. This is not a restaurant, but restaurants are allowed in that. And so there have been a number of new restaurants that have opened up, some of which are in former manufacturing or warehouse space, but those are permitted for those conversions under the current code. It's new retail space. And then obviously what this is a tasting room / shop. Requires a conditional use permit for the tasting room, and the retail portion of it needs to be in what was formerly.
That's what I was
space.
wondering. Is it retail? Is it really? Okay. You
Yeah,
answered
'cause the
my
nectary
question. Thank
had-
you so much.
Yeah, it's probably.
It's a
and
little
these-
tricky.
It is a little tricky. And looking back, it was a Tibetan Tibetan goods store, retail store.
Okay, are there further questions of staff? Then we can go to the applicant, Mr. Looney.
Hi there. I'm
Hi.
DC. This is Lisa, my wife.
Okay.
We're small business owners. We already run a wine bar and wine shop in Oakland. Lisa and I actually met working up here in 2007 for the wine harvest. And it went well, and we ended up moving down to San Francisco together. Had dreams of starting our own place. In 2010, we had the chance to do that. So we've been in business since 2010. We specialize in natural wines, which are just wines made in a very environmentally friendly way with minimal additives. And we really build community kind of around our space. We don't really kind of consider it to be, like on the same level as a bar. Like you said, there are other bars in town that serve alcohol. We won't be serving hard alcohol. Those are under type 47 liquor license. The type 42 is just specific to beer and wine. But plus we'll have a big food component. Even though we're not technically a restaurant, we can still serve cold food. So we'll be serving a lot of cold food and have a retail component of selling the food items to go as well. So it'd be like a little market, just kind of like you would find in Europe, where it's a higher end market with wines and food provisions. Lisa and I moved up here in January, so we're really excited. We're homeowners in Sebastopol. We have family up here and a lot of friends. We're friends with a lot of winemakers and the wine community. Even in the Barlow, we'll carry a lot of products that are made in the Barlow, including the cheese and the wine. So we kind of consider ourselves to be a pretty specialized place. We're really happy to be part of the Sebastopol community. And, I think it will be mutual if you give us the chance, because I think once you see what we can do, we'll really be kind of adding to it. We're proud we were just nominated in this year for a James Beard nomination, which is one of the highest accolades in the food and wine industry for outstanding wine program. And we were the only ones nominated in the entire state. Out of 20 businesses they selected from the entire country, we're the only ones in California this year. So we're proud of that. We're just small business. We work hard. We kind of love what we do. And we hope that you guys will accept us.
Thank you. Are there questions of the applicant from the commission? I see Vice Chair Fernandez has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry. We have a 2-year-old daughter who's trying to distract us.
That's what she's supposed to do, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're on to ice cream is our it's our last tactic.
Nice. It's your other business, is it similar hours of what you're proposing here?
A little bit later night in Oakland.
Yeah, we're open till 9 p.m. during the week and then 11 on the weekends.
Okay.
But we are right by the Fox Theater, so there are shows, and we're right downtown Oakland, so it's a little bit more of a a downtown kind of vibe. When we moved up here,
Go ahead.
we were intent on opening our business in Sebastopol. The Barlow was our first choice, so that's kind of why we're at this level now. We really, we felt it was kind of the best fit for us, just with, they do have a lot of retail and, a lot of weekenders, and we already have, a pretty good following up here. We have quite a few members of our wine club who live up here already.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is that, if you wanted to match that, say you're thinking down the road that you might want to stay open a little bit later, it'd be easier to get those hours approved now, even though you may not be open that late. And then down the road, if you decide to, you don't have to come back and, you get more time. So just wanted to see if you would be interested in doing that or consider that, just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I don't think it would hurt.
To try to be
Business
approved for
model.
later hours if we want to, sure. It's different up here than it is in downtown Oakland.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, you may always stay at those hours till late, but
Yeah.
sometimes the sidewalks in Sebastopol don't roll up till 9 o'clock.
Yeah. I would be
But
happy
yeah,
to
just to give
later
you some
if
options.
the City were to approve it,
Yeah, if the city
Yeah.
were to approve it, we're open to that.
like we could go up until 10 o'clock every night.
Mhm.
We hadn't
Okay.
really considered it before.
All right, thank you.
And Commissioner Burns, you have questions?
I do. Well, first of all, about staying open later, I have to say, I believe in Sebastopol. If you build it, they will come. People are looking for things to do. And with the barcade, I can't remember anymore, but they were going to be open very late. So just a thought there. I appreciate your forward thinking on that. But my question for you is, in my memory, that space is fairly small. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, are you going to have tables? Are you going to have tables outside? Will it be inside? Like how is the flow going to go? And how many people can you accommodate?
Yeah, so we will have some tables inside. The space, yeah, you could see here's the diagram. We'll have a little tasting bar. The retail shelves will kind of be along the walls there on the perimeter. And the space is it's actually 1,300 square feet. It's not 1,000 square feet, and it wasn't the Nectary, it was the Buddhist retail place. So we're right in between the Glass Studio and the Indigenous, across the street from the Redwood Provisions and the pizza place. So we're right there in the center of the Barlow. But there's a little bit more space than the Nectary had.
We're allowed an occupancy of up to 49 people, but we will probably have much less seats than that. It'll be cafe style seating. We are allowed to do a little bit of sidewalk seating in the walkway out in front. There will be a few small tables inside and a large communal table inside, mostly for hosting things like wine education classes. And
when you say you'll be serving food, when I looked on your website, I didn't see any actual food that you made. I just saw like food that you could buy. So is that something people can buy and open and eat there, or do you have an actual menu that you?
No, we actually do have a menu, and we'll be providing food service. So essentially, the food program that we have at the Punchdown in Oakland, we actually do have a full kitchen, and we do make things in-house there. And we provide full service there, which we'll provide here as well. So it's basically a restaurant, but without having warm food or the full kitchen. So a lot of our food product is served, they're the tin fish conservas, where, we'll actually open it up and plate it and serve it with some bread. And then, so there will be food served along with any of the tasting that people would want to do. And the tasting kind of complements the retail shop, because these wines are different and really special. So sometimes it's better to actually taste the wine before you want to buy it to bring it home. So, we're providing that to the community, and we're kind of, everything that we have on offer would be to provide the community with kind of our culture that we've created, which is from traveling all around the world. And we've studied wine. Our background is in studying wine, and we've actually been to a lot of different types of places, and then we've created our own in Oakland, and that's what we provide, and it's very successful there. It's kind of an adult way to, have fun, drink a bottle of wine with what we call apéro provision. So it's with cheese and charcuterie and little things that are kind of snacky and easy to kind of, if you're going to throw a dinner party, it would kind of be the beginning of the meal. But our food program is actually serving food on site.
Thank you so much.
Any additional questions from the commission?
Linda Kelly here.
Hi, Linda. You have the floor.
Okay. The word natural wines, is becoming very popular. And I'm assuming that by natural wines, you're talking organic, no added sulfates or sulfites, biodynamic, raised, dry farming, all of those included. And you said you're going to be using a lot of local wines, which we actually have quite a bit in this area, just in Sonoma County, let alone up in Mendo.
Yeah.
So I'm particularly interested in if that's what natural means.
Yes, you have it in a nutshell. I think it has to do with the farming, either at least organic, biodynamics are great, no chemical use in the vineyards. And as far as the winemaking goes, no chemical additives, no manipulation with the wines, sort of just grapes fermented. We can tolerate a very low level of sulfite addition, but we prefer wines that have none added. We have pretty strict criteria in general with the wines that we bring in. And we do have some really favorite local producers that we can't wait to help support and be sort of a showcase for.
Okay, well, I'm very glad to hear that. I've met the guy who did Couture wines, and then up at Try
Caleb
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, good friend.
My good friend worked for him while he was in college. So I just, and also how difficult it is, to do natural yeasts and all of that, rather. I mean, it's a hit and miss. So it is a
very risky.
very special.
It's
Yeah.
risky. It's not safe necessarily to do financially for a lot of winemakers. And a lot of these really cool, young, talented winemakers doing this do not have a venue. They can't afford to have their own fancy tasting room in their own winery. So we can really be a great place to showcase those wines. And like I said in the little sort of write-up that we presented to you guys, we can put the importance of Sonoma wine into the context of global wine really well with our
Okay.
experience. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to take up any more time, but I make my own red wine vinegar, and it's sometimes really hard for me to find, low sulfates. And so I have to do lots of manipulation with shaking the bottles of wine and stuff, but we'll move on to something else. But thank you for bringing this to us.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Is there a motion perhaps?
I think we need to, did we take public comment?
No, I think we need to
I'm so
offer
sorry.
public comment.
Is there public?
I think so.
I hadn't seen, I don't see any, well, I do see a member of the public. Gotta open, okay, the public hearing is now open. If anyone would like to speak on the issue.
Okay, and I'm
Seeing
not
any?
seeing anyone. We did receive one comment via email, or which has been forwarded to the commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Then I will close the public hearing. Did I see Everett Fernandez with its hand up?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, well, I'm going to start this off. So, I hear the concerns about the possible overconcentration or something that could happen. I don't know if the concern is that it's there now. I think there's advantages to having multiple places in one area. Shared food is one, for example, which is very important to offer. And rather than places having to either have a kitchen or not have food, Barlow's worked very well in sharing and supporting other local restaurants and so forth, and kind of a good relationship that way. So I think that's an advantage, as well as, you could park in one place and go to a couple of different places without having to get back in your car and drive after, you've been drinking. I don't think that if the issue is just the concentration in one area, but not necessarily the business, I don't know that it's going to be any less potential problematic to have it open somewhere else that could be closer to residents or schools or so forth. So, I kind of support that this is a good area to have that. Like I said, there's a lot of advantages. This is a very unique business. They all seem to be very unique. Ultimately, the market demand will determine what consumers want and support. Also, the fact that the proposed owners are not new to this. It's not a trial and error. They have the experience. They've done it before. They know what's involved. They're local, the kind of business that we do want to support, and they bring very unique items to that. So I think that, I do hear the concerns, but I think, like I said, that having places spread out throughout town isn't exactly better either. And I would also support allowing the closing times to be up till 11 o'clock, and that they could slowly grow into or decide not to and just keep it at 8. And that way they can kind of match other places there. They don't have to come back and use up planning department's time to do that. Again, I'm confident with the fact that they've done this before. It's not something that we kind of want to see how it goes. They have that experience. And with that, I would encourage, I'd certainly support this project. I think it's a good fit. And I don't know, entertain a motion yet, or if we're just gonna have more discussion, but if that's the case, I'm willing to make one.
Is there further discussion? I see Commissioner Fritz's hand. Is it up?
Yes, it was up. Sorry. Sticky finger. Yeah, I basically agree with everything Commissioner Fernandez has stated. I'm totally okay with the later closing. Again, it just makes it easier. You don't have to do it, but you don't have to come back either if you do want to do it in the future. So I would support that. I also don't have a concern about the overconcentration. I mean, I get the question, but again, I agree this is a unique business. And most of the kind of alcohol places in the Barlow have their own kind of take. And I think it's a great asset I think we have in the community, and it draws people here. And I think we want to encourage that. So I'm totally okay with that. The one thing I wanted to just sort of address, because it was in the staff report, was a question about the parking, whether or not we should increase the required parking from 2 to 3 spaces. I don't really care. I'm sure you all know. I'm fine with 2 spaces. If we have to go to 3 spaces, if you want to go to 3 spaces, that's okay with me. It's 1 parking space. I don't, there's plenty, I think, available in the Barlow's kind of official parking count. And they also have the overflow, which is not part of their official parking count. So I think the parking is going to be fine. And anything else? I think that was generally it. I will just also, with this use permit, express my desire to have standard conditions of approval that are more geared toward tenant improvements. Because here we are, seems like that's all we get are tenant improvement use permits, and we have this like 4 or 5 pages of conditions of approval, none of which really apply. So anyway, I also am in support of the project, and just wanted to kind of lay out my feelings on those kind of question items that were brought up.
Commissioner Kelly, do you have any comments or discussion? Commissioner Kelly, do you have discussion at this time?
Just to say that I agree with our other commissioners' comments, and you could already tell that I was pretty excited about having natural wine showcased, and sounds like some good food. So the parking issue, I don't know if it really makes a difference, but I'm fine with increasing it, because when you finally get to total build out, and those numbers are going to count. So I'm fine to leave it the way it was written by our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Commissioner Burns?
I don't have any comments at this time. Thank you. I agree with the other commissioners. I think it's a good usage. I'm not concerned about the consolidation. I think, not having to get in your car is really great. So yes, I'm good.
And I concur with their opinions as well. I'm okay with 11 p.m. closing. I think we should stick with the staff report on the 3rd parking spot, just so we know where we are when we get there. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for approval with the modifications of the time and with the staff's recommendation for parking.
And Everett, did you want to also move to strike finding number 2, which is,
yes.
Sorry, just to
Yes.
respect Paul's comment.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, will you call the roll, or do I need to restate the motion?
No, so I'll restate the motion. So this is to approve the alcohol use permit, conditional use permit, as provided in the findings and condition with the following modifications. Delete finding number 2 in Exhibit A, and for 1A, Exhibit B, the conditions of approval, specific conditions. 1A would change the hours of operation, shall be open to the public as take out as stated in the application. Hours of operation shall be between the hours of 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. We'll say between, because it doesn't have to be those hours.
Okay, and please call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Fritz,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fernandez,
Aye.
and Chair Ottinger.
Aye.
That is unanimously approved. And so there is a 7-day appeal period, but if it is not appealed, the decision for the approval will become final in 1 week's time.
Okay,
Good luck, you guys.
yeah, thank you very much.
When are you gonna open?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, hopefully within a few months. Thank you guys so much.
Oh,
Okay.
thank
Good
you for bringing
luck.
this.
Good
Good
night.
luck.
Mhm.
Have a great night.
Can't wait.
All right, you did it.
So moving on to the Sebastopol Little League Annual Report and Lease Discussion, and we have Mark Sanchetti with us here.
Yes, hi.
Do we need to do a staff introduction before this? I'm sorry.
I don't think so. So this is, but just for the public, if they are out there curious, our planning commission does serve as our parks commission as well. And so Mark is here on the behalf of Sebastopol Little League. He's the incoming president. I don't know if Andy's able to join us since he's out of town today. He's the outgoing president, who met you all last spring. And we are, this is the annual report due to the city. And then there are some updates to the lease that the Little League is proposing to discuss with you tonight.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, unfortunately, Andy did get in touch with me. He's traveling right now for work, so he did not get touchdown where he needed to be yet. So he's not going to be able to join us unless he, zooms in here, surprisingly. But the plan is he will unfortunately not be able to join us. So just I thought I'll share some numbers and some things, just kind of where we're at. I am the new Sebastopol Little League president. We have some amazing momentum going on right now. Our numbers last year in the 22 season, we had 368 players that signed up. Previous to 21, we had 279. So we saw a really big jump. Just to give you a little bit, numbers, in 2020, we had 295, which 2020, there's an asterisk next to that number every year. We didn't have a season that year. And previous to COVID, 2019, we were at 309. So we really have seen a lot of kids. They were it was really, really special coming out of COVID when a lot of kids were not, seeing their friends, not going to school, doing the Zoom world. When we came back into that spring, it was awesome. It was amazing. And parents excited, and that's really, continued. We play a fall ball league as well. Santa Rosa, it's a different than our spring league, right? So we, work with Santa Rosa American Little League. They are kind of, if you think about it as, say, the parents of it. So just a note here, our teams that are participating in that, we're seeing that trend carry over into that. So we have a lot of teams, a lot of kids continue to play fall ball, which is just getting wrapped up here this weekend. So our numbers are exciting. Our momentum's been really, really great. Myself and our board are anticipating those same numbers and, potentially increases going into this next season as we're planning, for our upcoming season. So lots of positivity. Last year we had to buy a lot more gear. We had to buy a lot more jerseys and everything else, but they're great problems to have. So I took over as president, as Carrie was stating here just a month ago, and my wife has been on the board for, I believe it's been 8 years. She stepped off and I stepped on, so we all are doing our part. But a lot of history in my family. My father played Little League here, and I did as well, and now my two boys are, so it's kind of neat. It's pretty special. So so those are some numbers. Any questions there on that? Okay. Then just some other, things to share. Andy's guidance to me as far as like what to share and things with you guys. He just said that, really, focus on those numbers and such. But really as an overall, report, I think why I kind of say momentum and excitement, and that kind of maybe, Carrie, I feel like just lead into talking about our lease agreement. Is that fine? Few years back, our lights that we have at Holly Field are old fluorescent lights that are basically obsolete, can't find replacement bulbs. So as one burns out, then lights go out, if that makes sense. So we've exhausted all options. In 2018, 2019, there was discussion of installing new lights, but nobody ever kind of took it and ran with that project and spearheaded it. So kind of last year, my wife and I were talking about it, and I talked to Andy Russell and the other board members and said, hey, listen, are you guys fine if I, nominate myself first and second, and I'll become the chair here of this light project and just look into it, right? They're like, hey, you got the energy, run with it. So that was kind of part of my, I guess, nomination for president, if you will, right now to take over. So with that and our lease agreement, we basically, the existing lease agreement, I believe was, shared with you guys. And, that's been in place for quite some time. What we're thinking about is, and been working and discussing here, and is to look at a longer term lease agreement with the city of Sebastopol, because the reasoning for that would be these obsolete lights. We as Sebastopol Little League would then go out and fundraise to purchase new lights at Pauley Field. The poles, everything are good. We'd just be replacing them with new LED, more efficient, less light pollution, and overall we're going to have a better field, more focused light, and that commitment, we're talking in the realms of $130,000 roughly, just to give you guys a ballpark number. So it's a huge number. So again, back a year ago, that was where I raised my hand and said, "Are you guys think I'm crazy? What do you think?" Yeah, I'm sure everybody feels that, but they didn't tell it to my face. So here I am. But part of that security we feel to go to potential donors. And so far, I've talked to a lot of friends and local businesses and people that have, been involved in the league, and whether it's generations ago and they're watching their grandchildren now, or whatever that situation is. And we've had not one time one person been a negative to that. They're very supportive and receptive to this idea, which is super exciting. So, but, one thing that we feel as a league to go to these donors is to have some security to, look at if we're going to ask for such a big donation, that we need to have some security to back that up, right? So that we look at those lights as a lease improvement that Sebastopol Little League would in theory own, for, the term. So that we were looking at a 25-year term, lease term, because that matches the, the use, if you will, the life expectancy for the lights. So that's where we've come up with that, just, trying to just pair and match things together here. So anyway, so overall, that's kind of, I'm just trying to be very high level and not too much in the weeds. And, I'm looking to you, Kathy and Carrie, if I'm, nodding the head, if I'm going good there, but right now that's kind of where we're at. And those are intentions. That's why we're looking that way. Some other just maybe notes to share, or maybe I'll pause there. Any questions?
I'd like to begin because I understand your predicament perfectly. I'm the current president, quickly nominated, had no idea what I was getting into, but Redwood Rainbow Square Dance Club, and we manage Wishman Hall. And in 2018, we asked the city for a 20-year lease because we were planning to put solar power on the roof. The city did not approve it. And then, of course, quickly thereafter, COVID set in. And now we went through the process of at least finding out what it would cost. But when we looked at the issue, our lease is so close to coming up in 10 years, we don't have that time frame to get a return on our investment to ask for that much money, even though by the time we got all the credits from the solar company that was really happy to do the job and wanted to help us so much, even to help us raise money. With 6 years left on our lease, we just didn't feel we could make that investment. It didn't make any sense to our members. So I understand the need for the organizations that run our public Parks Department programs and others in the city need that long-term commitment in order to make investments and improvements. It's just a reality. So I understand it. I don't know whether the city council understands it or what their reasoning was for keeping it short-term.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Fernandez.
Yeah. First of all, Mark, thank you for
come here to present this. And I walked by through Ives Park today, and as always, the field looks great. I really appreciated being able to look in and not have signs all the way around. I mean, it really adds to the park and the ambiance, and so it's nice to have that there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just to share on that real quick too. After the city council meeting, last year, we took, some of those, comments, and also, talking with, Andy Russell, our president, so our fields and maintenance board member took that upon themselves here and just said, hey, we got to update all our sponsor, boards. And so we took that into account and just put that into play last season. So thank you.
Yeah, great. No, look great. Just want to note what your criteria and process is for if someone wants to use a field, how, what do they go through? What criteria do you look at for that?
Yeah, good question. Great question. So when right now just to share to, lead into that, we work with an adult softball league. And so they utilize the field in the fall time. And I actually reach out to them, just curiosity at how big it is. I know it's very big and it's very important to them because they utilize it in the evening hours, right after work. And so there's actually 27 teams. So we're talking 300 plus different, 300 to 325, participants within that league on top of our number. So they're a very big part of us. Again, nothing to do with Sebastopol Little League, right? Separate, entity, if you will. However, that's a big part, and it helps us a lot with our maintenance of the field. The Sebastopol Little League has the full, cost and of all the maintenance and everything there. As far as just say a rental agreement, right? Just recently, I want to say it was in the beginning months of October, we had a family that reached out to rent the field, and they were gonna have a birthday party. So our, process right now is we have a rental agreement. The folks that would be renting it have to provide proof of their own insurance, and we, we'll rent it for whatever. You don't need to say play baseball, but the big concern is that it needs to be returned back into the same conditions as prior, because if you wanted to, rent it for a dirt bike track, well, that's not really a good use, right? And you're going to destroy the field. So, and as far as like a fee, we usually do, it's minimal, so much an hour type of thing. But that was just as of recent in October. I want to say I did ask our other board members, like, how often maybe does it happen? And just last year, we feel that this is outside. This is not Sebastopol Little League. This is not the adult softball league that I'm referenced earlier, maybe 4 to 5 times. So the tricky parts, right, is say springtime with our added teams now, great problem with that, as I shared. But, when you're scheduling practices, we'll have 2 teams on a night, like from the weeknights, that will, be able to practice there. So simple as 5 to 7, 7 to 9, right? And so the springtime is very, occupied with Little League activities. But if there's a Sunday or, it's got to fit our schedules, if you will, and things like that. So, so that is our process that is in place now. I know that was some concerns and, comments just, because I was on that city council meeting and such, but I think, the kind of, I would say the reception that the Little League board has had was just kind of one of how we did with those sponsorship signs, right? And I think what's been great with Andy Russell, meeting with you guys is just kind of having a better avenue for a dialogue, So, I'm just, wanting to share those kind of, sentiments that we've kind of felt and had.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Are there times when, say, it's just open, somebody can go in and, sit on the grass, read a book, or I know, obviously when without not practices or but I'm sure usually there's activity going on, right? So it's more of a, it's not just going to be open people there. So
Right. Well, and I think you bring up a good point. It's kind of a tricky feeling sometimes, right? Like you say, you walk by and it's like, wow, this is beautiful, but it's like, wow, it's kind of a, it's off limits sometimes feeling, right? Because it's locked. So part of that is that it is locked because we have dealt with vandalism, which I'm sure you guys throughout the city deal with that. And so, we've had it where, the fences have been cut. One thing to share too, just about some things and some issues we've had some issues at actually both fields, down at Laguna, down there off of Morris Street. We've had, some real homeless issues with homeless people there. At Pauley Field now, when you say come off right below the, drawing a blank on the name of the street, so forgive me, but say walking in right below the fire station right there. So as you walk there to the left, as you approach the field, last year, I had, some parents when they're say picking up their kids at a later practice or whatever it was, there's, homeless folks there and setting up like a cot, if you will, tying it from a redwood tree to a redwood tree. And, some folks are just there sleeping and it's fine, meaning they're not, but others, we've had instances where people are, broke into the field, to answer back to your question, broke into the field, doing workouts with their bags and obviously not of like maybe sane, sound, safe minds, right? And, parents being extremely concerned about that. So that's been an issue that we've dealt with. So, and that also kind of goes why the field and the maintenance side of it, right? If we had the field completely open and not locked, we would have added maintenance in the field. The wear and tear is a lot, just even with it being locked, right? In our maintenance and things like that. But that homeless thing, that's kind of a comment of a, I guess of a year comment with you guys, right? That one instance, because my children were going to that practice, there was drug paraphernalia and it was sad, right? And it's like, man, like that stuff shouldn't be around children, shouldn't be around anything, but just the safety of your children, so that's one of those situations that we deal with. And actually just last Saturday, now I keep thinking about it, my mind's spinning. Last out there at Ives Park, we had a 10 o'clock game and there was homeless folks like in the stands, those bleacher stands there. And one of the dads, the mom was like, didn't even think of it because someone was all covered up and they kind of like came to, and the, mom was freaked out and ran away. And one of the dads like, hey, hey, we got kids going on here and people are going to sit for a game, kind of thing. So, everybody, is careful and, polite as possible, but also just, cautious of the children. So.
Yeah. And, I was encouraging to have these kind of dialogues and reports, and not for any main reason is to hopefully work better together and, kind of know what you're up to and, what can we do to be supportive. As an example, we're looking at making some long overdue improvements to Ives Park, and it would, I think it would be important to have a representative from Little League to be part of that, whether it's a committee or group to, because, you're a big part of it, and you probably have some good input as far as how people use it and, some insights that other people may not have. So, would encourage you to be supportive in that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm totally open ears, open arms to all that. And I appreciate your guys, just that openness, right? I mean, hey, we all are in the same community. We all live here together. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And Chair, I have a couple of questions of staff. Is it okay if I do that now as well?
Yeah, I have a question of Mr. Sanchetti, and I see Deborah Burns has her hands up too. Could we?
Well, I mean, I'm just wondering, are we doing both at the same time, questions of staff, or are we just
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Let's do that. Let's just have the discussion. Yeah.
Okay. So, Carrie, on the top of page 4, it says this lease agreement shall commence on July 17, 2001 and terminates on December 31st, 2005. Are there updates to this, or is this just the
At
last
this point, this has been just renewed annually.
Okay.
So, Mark has been working on some draft language, and a couple other folks from the city. I've sort of been asked to take it over, or volunteered to take it over, whatever, just because it's the coordination, wanting to make sure we have the commission's input on this. So we don't have that for you. A lot of it is the same, like the insurance provisions and whatnot. We were originally going to do an amendment, but it's such a simple lease. Let's just do a new lease and get it, the stuff that needs to carry over will carry over. So I talked with Mark about that earlier today. But this lease was just renewed year after year. And so this is the latest lease there is.
Okay. And could you just kind of go over what the procedure would be to have the lease, extended, and, does the planning commission, as park commission, and, how are we involved? Does it go to city council? How would all that work?
Sure. So city council would ultimately approve it. And any changes to the revisions of this. And so we'll be doing kind of noting what those changes are. My hope is that you guys can provide input tonight. I don't know if it's so complicated that it needs to come back for another review, since there's only a couple of provisions that are, it's really just the length of a lease. And then if there are any other comments you want me to try to work out with Mark, if it's something you want to come back as a commission to see the final lease, we can do that. It's not required by any policy or document in the city.
Okay.
This could have actually gone right to council, but I knew that you guys would, and thought it would be great for you guys to have some input on this and discussion.
All right, great. Thank you. And Mark, thank you again. I really appreciate you being here and all your information.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So Commissioner Burns, you had questions?
I do have a couple of questions. When we were talking before about the lease, and it was stated to us that it was very difficult to rent it for anything besides games because of the damage potentially to the grass and to the field, and that you guys paid for the maintenance and took care of the maintenance. So I'm hearing you say now that you do let it go for other public venues, but that was one of our concerns in the past, is to have that space just be for the Little League, and how often is it being utilized, and that it's not being utilized for a larger community. And so is that still accurate, that it is something that you can't really rent out for other venues because of the detriment to the quality of the condition of the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the use, right, is very dependent, and that's part of that rental agreement, right? Like when we initially, say somebody reaches out or have that initial conversation. And to your point, yes, if somebody was to potentially construct something such as a stage, or who knows, right? I mean, I think what's like most important would be, kind of what Everett was referencing, was just a dialogue and a question and a reach out. I think what can be concerning to the field is that if somebody goes out there with a telehandler piece of equipment to construct something, and they rut out all the outfield and break the irrigation, and next thing you know, we're really like the Little League is at a loss, not a gain, by financially by allowing that. We work really hard and really try to maintain the field and keep it at that level. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess my walk away understanding was that, Sorry, I don't remember the gentleman who was before the commission at that time, but any parties, any events where there's, people on the field, that it was basically not adequate, that most all uses that came to you would not be appropriate for that field. So it seemed like it was just for sports. And, like he had mentioned that people came for parties, but so just to be clear, is there legitimately any use? Because he seemed to make it seem like not really, because of the condition of the field and the money you pay and everything you just said. You don't want to be liable for someone.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, well, that's our process too, right? Like someone's got to, provide insurance and what have you. I think, if you look at the, and they'd be renting it, from us. I could think of like 1,000 examples of good and 1,000 probably bad use potentially, right? And it would depend on the timing of the year and what have you, right? Middle of winter and it's wet. I mean, we stay off of it too, So I think to answer your question, Sebastopol Little League, are we open ears to trying to be, better open arm communicator with, utilizing the field to more, people in the public? Yes, we are. But part of that is that we have our set calendar of our activities, and we also have the, the right, things to, right activities, right? And going through that whole kind of rental agreement process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have one more question of you too, and I don't want to pry, and if you don't have that information, maybe you can send it to me later, but I'm wondering if financially, whether the effects of COVID and you're being shut down for a period and coming back, has it been difficult for the Little League, or are you finding your finances are balancing well?
Great question. Our numbers, I'm just trying to look up some of my numbers and stuff here. So we are at better numbers today than we were pre-COVID. So 2019, we had 309 children. We had 368 last year. So we are in a stronger position. We are in a stronger position financially. And kind of with this added, increase and this added kind of excitement, I think a lot of that too was it was as safer. It's, baseball is somewhat distant, coming out of COVID. So that really provided a lot of comfort for a lot of parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being outdoors and I kind of had your feeling there, right? I thought we're going to have these ups and downs, and having our fall numbers up like they are right now is really, 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 really strong support going into next spring.
Good. That's good to know. I know that doesn't always, sometimes more people doesn't equate to the right numbers, but I'm glad to hear that that's working for you.
Yes. It's kind of exciting. For example, Emelino Little League, we in the major division just last year, I can speak on that because I just have it in my head because I was a coach last year there. We had 5 teams in Sebastopol. They had 1 or 2. So we would interleague with them, meaning that, they kind of needed to utilize us, right? So they weren't just playing each other every time. And so, previous to that, there was 2 majors teams. So it seems kind of from this kind of age group downward, like kind of where these now 11s last year going into 12-year-olds next year down, there's just been really good numbers. And it's, so that's when I reference being excited. That's kind of the exciting, parts of that. Just so trying to keep myself motivated too, right? Like you said, to sign up, raise your hand, and first and second yourself for for taking something on. But it feels good.
Good. Commissioner Burns, is your hand up because you want to?
No, I'm sorry. I put it down. Thank you.
Okay, were there any other comments or discussion right now? Well, thank you very much for coming. I guess, Carrie, you specified there's a committee working on the lease.
It's me and Mark.
You and Mark.
So I don't call it a committee necessarily.
Well, you have my input about, about the lease time frame, or at least a commitment.
Yeah, and so just to,
Compensate.
I think we can specify, the Little League has asked for a 25-year lease, which since it's a ball field and it's been this way for the last 15, 20 years, however long, I don't think there's, I mean, unless the commission has some express issue that they have with that term, the city does currently have a way to terminate that. I think if they're, the Little League is putting in substantial investment, yes, there's, Kathy, what you had expressed about what is, what's the appropriate way to deal with that. We wouldn't want to, obviously the city has no intent of just terminating the lease at this point, since they're maintaining the ball fields and it's a good relationship there. And the city is definitely supportive of the Little League. But should something happen, what would that look like? I think is probably the biggest issue to kind of understand how to frame that in a lease.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what the city would think was important, that they would need that facility or that space for something else other than ball fields, just politically, but I mean, environmentally, that's part of our park system. It's space that's being used for an activity which we need. I don't know what other issues there would be unless Little League defaulted or couldn't maintain, and then at which case you could end the lease. But I'm trying.
Right, I think that's, the only thing Mark and I could come up with was if they somehow weren't maintaining the insurance or things like that were happening, or
Yeah, we would in theory be, default of our lease type thing, right? So.
And even if there's something critical like, homeless or a bomb shelter, I mean, I just can't think of what it would be that you would want to eliminate that structure. Now, I know other people wanted to put the creek through it. So maybe
but we have clear direction from council at this point on that. There's an adopted strategy moving forward, which the planning commission also, that was also one of the options the planning commission had recommended. So, so I think, in my mind, that's settled. It's now adopted. The other thing I would note is that when we will be redoing the main trail within the park, and we're using state grant funds with that will require a deed restriction that the park remain a park for probably about the same amount of time. So it's not like we're going to suddenly develop it with housing or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, say 2 hands up, Commissioner Fritz.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, offer my support. I don't know, if the council wants a recommendation from us or whatever on the lease terms, but I think that totally makes sense. And I understand why they would need that. And if they're going to make, those kinds of improvements at their own expense, I think they should be, given the opportunity to do that. And if they need the time, I agree. Like, what else are we going to do with that space at this point? And it's been used by the Little League, like Carrie said, for the past 25 years. So I'm just kind of curious where, if the lease has been from whenever, the beginning of 2000, 2001, were you using it prior to that without a lease, or was there something, what's the history of the prior to this lease arrangement?
So since the beginning of, was before named Poly Field was Ives Park, trying to think of the exact date. My father played there in the second year of, 1957, 1958, my father played there second year of Spousal Little League, and that's when the field, was created. I could be wrong a little bit on some dates, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. I do know my father played in the second year of, the existence of Spousal Little League. My uncle played the very first year. We recognized all those folks at our opening day some years ago. So it's been a ball field. The Poly family, I believe in their trust, left that to Spousal Little League I'm actually, our family is friends with them, with the Paulies, which is kind of neat as well. So anyway, so yeah, so that a lot of history, a lot of years.
Mhm. And you just used that field and the two over by the community center? That's all the fields you use in town for the Lily?
Yes, we do specifically. However, with our numbers have grown, what we do is we go to, say, Parkside School for the lower divisions.
Mhm.
So like they have all, you know, their fields aren't, I would say, as maybe up to par. The other school would be Sunridge. We went last year, myself and our fields guy, we took our equipment, went and tuned up, I think it was Gravenstein or Hillcrest School, because we just had so many teams. We couldn't get enough, you know, Poly Field's, you know, really critical because we can get multiple practices there. And, you know, so that's what we do. We go to the schools and have an agreement with them for the lower divisions.
Mhm.
And then as the kids, you know, continue to grow, we really use the older divisions at Polyfield, and we reference, you know, Clayhan Park down there.
Great, thank you.
I see Vice Chair Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. I actually do have one more thing, Mark. Just wanted to see if you could comment on the diversity of the individuals that use the park, what efforts might be made or allowed for kids or adults from different economic backgrounds to be able to participate.
Yes. Yeah, great question. So we don't turn one child away. There's if financially that is an issue, we offer scholarships, and there's never a child that gets turned away. Boys and or girls can both play Sebastopol Little League baseball. I actually had a phone call today with a very good friend of mine that his daughter is wanting to sign up to play baseball next year, and he called to talk to me about it. And I'm like, let's go, you know, let's sign her up, let's go. And you know, we will utilize through our board for scholarships to then fund and or, you know, never turn anybody away. That's very important to the, you know, current and, you know, years, you know, prior of our board. We're very supportive of that. So there's never an issue there. What's really neat, I think it's kind of part of our community though, is that like last year, I'll give you a real life example. On one of our teams, we had a child that had never played baseball before. And it was like hit the ball and they started to chase the ball like it was kickball. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like, let's, you know, the coolest part was that, you know, they had a glove. It wasn't a very good one. And, you know, kids that I knew that I have coached, right? And we're friends and everything. They're like, hey coach, you know, can we get so-and-so? Can we give them like, you know, remember, you know, our other glove we had, like, and then, oh yeah, no problem. Hey, I have my extra bat. Why don't, and like the kids just did it amongst each other, like on my team. Fast forward, we played that same child. He was on the opposing team last Saturday at Poly Field. He's a phenomenal ball player. He's an awesome kid. I didn't recognize him because he got so big now. And I joked with him, I got to check your driver's license. And he's 11 or 10, you know, because he got so big. But that's kind of what we, you know, there's never any like, oh, you can't, you know, any push away, I guess. We're, you know, very, very, very supportive of that. And everybody's got gear and really, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
When you put out information, whether about Little League signups or anything like that, do you provide that in other languages, like in Spanish, or is it all in English, or is there any outreach?
Yeah, yes, we do. Yes, we do. I would, you know, English and Spanish.
All right, great. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for bringing that information to us and bringing your concern to the city about the lease. I can understand how important that is.
Well, thank you guys for your time and listening. And, you know, I probably am not running away as president for the next couple of years, maybe here, but, you know, I look forward to the continued dialogue and the partnership here and making it stronger. So thank you. And Carrie, thank you for your efforts here as well.
Yeah, thank you for what you do and the time you spend doing it.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, moving on the agenda. Come back. Oh,
We don't need to make any recommendations or any, I guess the comments or anything, Carrie, we're good?
No, I think the information I got from you was spot on for what I needed, and
Okay.
I'm glad the signage came up because I talked with Mark about that and said, the planning commission has always been concerned about the signage there. He's like, yeah, we've changed it. I was like, yeah, you should talk about it. So I'm glad it came up tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
so my favorite thing, the level of service report.
All right.
And that's
I'm glad somebody else is excited about it. So the level of service report includes information about the status of the general plan and its implementation, as well as statuses on city standards and services. It also provides an update on city park issues, as well as annual planning, fire, police, and building department information. I do have a few department things that I want to mention. This level of service was also given to City Council at their October 4th meeting, just as a information item. And so we'll go from there. I want to note that the fire chief wanted me to let you guys know that a new Wildland Type 3 fire engine is on order and is expected to be delivered in the summer of next year. He also wanted to note that response times on calls saw a decrease of 30 seconds from last year, 2020, and over 60% of fire departments' calls continue to be medical related. For the Public Works Department, cities and water sewer capacity is continually being monitored and has enough capacity to provide for current development projects and current proposed projects. There was a small decrease in overall water production from 22, but that's to be expected with current drought conditions. The police department handled 11,137 incidents in 2021, which averages, 2021, which averages about 230 per day. Officers made 65 felony arrests. 16 of those were property related. 10 of them were crimes against persons, 24 drug related, and 15 were warrant probation or parole violations. For the planning department, the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, for the city was met this year, and the goal was to produce 120 units, and we produced 123. So of those 123 units, 31 came from the Project Home Key site at the Sebastopol Inn, and a few were part of the Park Village lots that were converted to permanent RV pads. Last year, the city did see a small decrease in the production of ADUs, but staff still receives interest on a daily basis for those types of construction. And I also want to note that as of the October 4th meeting, the planning department has already exceeded the amount of permits from last year for this year so far. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, while the Planning Commission acted on fewer permits last year, they did also act on several long-range projects, and those included the Affordable Housing Development Discussion Series, the Calder Creek Naturalization Project. They formed the Ives Park Subcommittee, which was to work on the Calder Creek Naturalization Project and other improvements in Ives Park. The gas station ban ordinance was also another item. that was adopted last year, and the climate action framework. So with that, if there's anything else that Carrie wants to add, I will open it up for any questions you all may have.
I will note a lot of so in terms of the number of permits this year that John noted, we did see a resurgence this year of the temporary use permits. So like Peacetown and which the commission reviewed, but we reviewed a lot of the smaller single day event permits, like the IPA 10K that was back, and a number of the other one-off kinds of things there.
Okay, Vice Chair Fernandez.
Yeah. I know this is not your department directly, but I'm just curious on your viewpoint on how the city or the community is keeping up with maintenance of existing stuff and projects, and oftentimes that's always a tough situation. Lack of personnel and funding and so forth. To just see how you guys kind of see it.
John?
Yeah.
You can toss it to me. You can toss
Yeah,
it
I
back to me
might
if you want
defer
to.
that one
John,
to you. That's more, I'm not privy to all that.
Sure. And I will actually rely on my experience as someone who did facility master planning for a decade or more. And that is, there is a perennial issue with government funding, in that there's always a lot of money, or when there's a lot of money in grants, it is generally always for making new. So making a new park, making a new expanding services, building a new roadway or a highway or bike path. There is rarely money for maintenance of your existing facilities, and this has kind of been a perennial issue. I've seen it with a lot of public facilities. So you have something that's fairly new, and that's great for a number of years. You can maintain it, but things do wear out, and things, I know we've kind of seen that with eyes, where the pathways are all worn out and they need to be replaced. I think the city, from a parks perspective, we could be using more of the Measure M dollars, which can be used for maintenance, although it can't supplant, substitute in existing dollars. So we have to maintain the same staffing and whatnot, and those are requirements of those. So we can use those for new things. Some of that money is being used for brand new projects like the restroom at Burbank. But some of those dollars, I think you'll see when we don't have a big project to do, will go towards more maintenance. Like it might be additional pathway, length in Ice Park, which we know is going to take more than one round of funding to get that done. I do know that Public Works has struggled with not so much the city facility side of things. I think the facilities are in decent shape. Some of them are older, like City Hall and whatnot, but they definitely are getting the maintenance required. New roofing, at the firehouse, I think, is one of the things that was just done. And obviously the city has upgraded the solar and that's being maintained really well. So I think the facilities there are fine. I think it's a little harder where you can't, unfortunately, there's just been a lot of vandalism and that type of thing lately. I think that's not unique to Sebastopol. Talking to Dante, that is something that's kind of happening, I would guess statewide, but probably more than statewide. Why that is, I'm not sure. But I do know that they do sometimes feel like they have a hard time keeping up with whether it's graffiti removal or illegal dumping. I think you'll probably all see this in the Press Democrat, but when the RVs were down at Morris Street, there was a significant that was a really significant burden for the Public Works Department. They were hauling 2 to 3 truckloads of trash out of the lagoon every single day, just trying to keep up with things. That has gotten much, that the issue has basically resolved. There's obviously there are still some locations that do see dumping, but it's much less of an issue now that the RV Village has opened. So that is definitely one thing that has allowed them to have more time. And so I'm kind of just telling you what, conversations that Dante and I have, or Public Works and I have had, and some of their struggles. So, yes, it is a little bit more difficult. The security, and I think part of it is there for graffiti and other things like that. It's really difficult to find the people and prosecute them. And even even if the DA, which we don't control, decides to prosecute, what the penalties aren't necessarily. I don't, that's a whole different thing that I'm not going to get into the criminal justice system. I'll get myself in trouble because I really know nothing about it. But it is hard to deter. I know the Public Art Committee has looked at, could we do security cameras for the sculpture garden, since they are, they're other people's sculptures and there's a sensitivity to that. Unfortunately, we did have some vandalism of when the first sculptures were installed, but fortunately we have not had any since then. So I don't know what that was. It was just, one person and they're not around anymore, or if once there were a bunch of sculptures and that it felt more like a place. So.
Yeah, and I just have always felt that when new projects come or approval, we talk about all the conditions of approval, and there should be a subject line of what is the maintenance future for this? What is that going to require? That's just part of the discussion and part of the just knowledge of that. I think it should just be kind of a routine. It should be included.
Right. No, I think we actually added that to the Planning Commission work plan as hey, if we're going to do these projects, what are the life kind of costs to it?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, little question. I remember a time when we didn't know whether our sewage going to the Santa Rosa Regional Pump Station was rainwater seeping into the pipes or whether it was extra low because the sewage was leaking out of the pipes. So we're in a situation now where we're pretty sure the sewage pipes are not leaking on most, or do we suspect that that's going on still?
That's a good question. It's probably one better directed to Dante. However, I do know that there is an issue with historic sewer laterals. So that's basically the connection between your house and the main pipe in the road, right? And that's called the lateral because it goes laterally off of the main pipe. A lot of those were built out of clay in the past, and so they crack and damage. As properties are redeveloped, we usually do, and I know Public Works has some thresholds by which they require people to scope them. So you put a little, mini camera in it to see if there's cracks or not. Technologies I know have gotten better. You can do what's called pipe burst now, where instead of digging a big trench, you kind of put a sleeve through it that then bursts that pipe, but then lays in another pipe. And so that's certainly for homeowners where it needs to be done is a lot less expensive. I do know that there was a motion, an item before City Council in this last year. Part of that was through a settlement with, I'm going to get the name of the organization wrong, River Keepers or something like that, due to some contamination. And one of the things the city has set up is a revolving loan fund to assist homeowners who need to do that. So they had a couple of options. One was to either do that or to do a sewer lateral ordinance. and they chose not to do the sewer lateral urgents. I have seen those before. They are, I will say they're a good way for a city that doesn't have a lot of money to deal with it. So I personally was a little disappointed because it kind of happens at the home sale. I know the realtors wanted to make sure it wasn't gonna hold up home sales, but I think there are ways of structuring them where you can give people like 90 days and the new owner can do it, and it's not a burden on the existing older homeowner who may not have the money in hand. It can be taken care of through escrow and things like that. So we did not adopt that. I think it's probably something the city should reconsider in the future, because I think as infrastructure ages, that is one of the bigger issues in terms of the superage realm. So that's the latter, those are every single lateral between a house and the main. And I think in Sebastopol, the laterals are actually owned by the city or maintained by the city, which is at least that connection, which is huge, and that is very unusual for a city. Usually it's the homeowner.
I'll say that I have a personal experience with this.
You probably know more than me when it comes to
Yeah, we did have a lateral pipe break that we had to replace. I would imagine, I live in an older neighborhood. I would imagine that happened. I mean, we got to the point where it was causing issues, so we definitely needed to replace it. I would suspect there's many conditions where there's cracks or holes or whatever because it was a clay pipe, and my property, and I'm sure a lot of the older properties have clay pipe that are cracked and either leaking out or leaking in. It kind of happens both ways, but it's interesting to hear about that kind of sewer lateral kind of ordinance might help that. I mean, we obviously took care of it ourselves, but it is definitely, I think it probably happens a lot, and
Right.
people probably don't know that it's happening until it becomes really problematic, but.
Any other discussion about the
Actually,
levels of service?
I just wanted to, I always like seeing these reports actually every year, so it's always kind of interesting to me. So I always appreciate them. And I did notice one thing that was a little strange, and this is like in the backup documentation, I think. It was on page 30. So it has to do with water consumption.
I was gonna say, this is gonna be a water chart, isn't it?
But there was together single and multifamily residential usage account for 666% of all water usage in Sebastopol, which seems like a bit of an odd statistic.
I believe it's supposed to be 66.6%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they left out a decimal there.
I saw that. That seems kind of suspect.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, just make sure that you're copying and pasting for next year or something. That's the point, the right place. But yeah, I appreciate all the information. I think it's very interesting to sort of get a kind of, annual overall picture of where things stand with all the kind of various infrastructure pieces. It's always interesting to see what kind of, stuff we've been doing as a planning commission, look back on the last few years in terms of the number of applications and types of applications and stuff. It's kind of interesting to see what the trends are.
I think it's good to have it all in one place, so when you do need to look for that information, it's all there and basically pretty current.
Yeah.
Saves time in the long run.
Yeah, I do refer to this throughout the year too for various reasons. So yeah, I definitely appreciate it.
Great.
Okay.
A question, Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Kelly.
I know we sell some water, and I heard it reported, I think it was at the city council meeting, that our selling water has dropped. Why would that be in a drought? You would think that would have been.
I can probably answer that question. It's probably.
Let me ask the second part of that question. And do we track what usage it's for? Is it for residential? Is it for, hauling for commercial uses? or agriculture?
Sure. So before this year, I don't believe we tracked, although Public Works may have a sense of what the water haulers were using it for. It could have been, you're correct, agriculture, folks who's needed because their wells went out or they're not getting enough water from the wells. Construction, watering construction sites to keep dust down is one of the other things. The city council, I believe it was early 2021, and John, you were actually around for this, you might remember too, but the city council did have an item where they looked at water sales and they limited them to potable water only. So you could not use water to irrigate fields or to do the construction site stuff, to fill up swimming pools, anything like that. It was potable water for either animals or so it could be for, your livestock or for your household use. And so that probably accounts for the lower rate of water sales, because people who were using it for ag or construction use were no longer allowed to do that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And I will say on the water use, because this came up at the city council meeting, so the city isn't hitting the 25% reduction. When the public works superintendent, Friday was discussing it, he said it's kind of twofold. One is Sebastopol residents already use a pretty low rate of water usage. So, if you're already doing good, it's hard to do 25% better necessarily. And the other is that they're continuing to do education and door flyers where they see people where there's overspray for sprinklers on the streets or, that type of a thing. But there was some water use when COVID hit, and I think that's continuing where people are actually growing more of their own food at home, and so there's more water use. And I know I don't water my apple trees, but I do certainly have to water my tomato plants, which I wasn't growing before COVID. So, I think a lot of us are doing that. So that also accounts for some of that. If the home gardening weren't such a trend and a positive trend that the city, wants to encourage, and there are no daily limits on food growing. There's a 2-day limit on aesthetic plantings, but there's no limit on gardening, and so that probably accounts for some of that as well.
Do we think that some of that is also more people working from home and students staying at home?
John's nodding. Do you have a comment about that, John? You can respond to.
Yeah, I would say overall, there's more people are at home. They might be able to, in between a meeting or something like that, go out and water their garden real quick, before it does get too hot, where they're not able to do it if they're at work. So I think that the newer trend of working from home and also kind of having home garden stuff has increased the water consumption a little bit more. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing overall. I mean, if it's done in moderation, then I think it's, the home gardening I would be an advocate for, because you're cutting your store trips down and whatnot. So
I'm wondering if either of you know what kind of uptake there has been in that Bay Wren water kind of fixture replacement program. Do you know if that's, people have been doing that, or if that's been,
I can get you
popular?
stats for that. I do know that there've been a number of single family residents mainly who have done that. One of the nuts they're trying to crack is how to engage landlords. And because that's certainly a large chunk of people that are, if they're not in the area, but they could do that, then it covers 2 to 6 households or more. instead of just each individual one. So we can get the updated stats from Bay Run. They do track that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. We participated. We got a toilet and a shower head, so that's kind of cool. But it was also good to learn that most of our fixtures were actually pretty good. So,
Cool.
but yeah, I think I think it's a great program for the city to promote. The more people we can get engaged in that, I think it's gonna be wonderful.
Okay, are we ready to move on? We don't need to
You don't need to accept it or anything.
Okay.
City council does need to accept it because it also includes it's part of our general plan requirements that we give an annual report, and then we send that report to the Office of Planning and Research at the state. So, but they have already done the official accepting of it.
Okay.
So I guess this should have been under informational reports. You're right, Kathy. I
Oh,
put
well,
it
no,
under the wrong thing.
it's okay. I just wanted to make sure. I'm not good at this, so I'm relying on you to know. Are we moving on to our training next?
I can pull that up. Is that a question or a
I just wanted to make sure we were okay on.
check in with folks?
Can we take a quick 5-minute bio break?
Well, that would be nice.
Probably a good idea. and then I'll get the technical stuff worked out while y'all are gone.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
5 minutes.
All right, Sam, I am gonna try to figure out if I can do this again. Last time I actually got it the first time to figure out how to do the sound, but
I wish you had a beer.
all right, but right now I can't even get on my computer, so all right. All right. I think I need to.
Decision makers have, you must become familiar with a broad array of planning and zoning law. These include the U.S. Constitution.
Hey, Sam, can you hear this?
Powers that address planning and zoning laws.
Yep, nice and clear.
Sam, I see you're highlighted, but I can't, maybe it's my sound and I had to undo my speakers.
Yeah, can you testing 1, 2, 3? Can you hear me now, Carrie?
State and federal statutes that address planning and zoning regulations. State statutes that affect the conduct of local government business. State and federal court decisions.
Hey, Max, since I see that you're there, Max?
Yes.
All right,
Hello?
I'm having problems. I can't hear anybody. Oh, there we go. Can you guys hear my audio?
Hear it now?
I
Yep,
can hear
heard
you
it
now.
fine.
I have to take my headset
All
off
right.
to my sound to transfer over and okay. Can you guys hear the audio and the video?
Yeah.
Nuisance and police powers.
Yep.
And state attorney general opinions that interpret state law.
There you go. Perfect.
It's like an
Awesome,
overwhelming
thank you.
list. We will take.
All right, I feel naked without my headset, but the sound doesn't work when I have my headset on. Are you all ready? Excellent.
Every local official and interested citizen could benefit from the simple, straightforward explanation of the planning law. To understand the authority that local decision makers have, you must become familiar with a broad array of planning and zoning law. These include the U.S. Constitution, state powers that address planning and zoning laws, state and federal statutes that address planning and zoning regulations, state statutes that affect the conduct of local government business, state and federal court decisions that interpret federal and state laws, state and federal court cases that apply common law principles of nuisance and police powers, and state attorney general opinions that interpret state law. This seems like an overwhelming list, but we will take our time and define each of these as they apply to planning and zoning law. We will start with how planning officials are empowered and then move on to each type of law and how they affect the duties of a planning official. A number of court decisions are used to help explain the concepts that will be covered here today. However, remember that court cases are being heard every day throughout the United States at the state and federal level. And some of the concepts that we describe here today may be impacted by those decisions. Always consult your local attorney for legal decisions. The remainder of the discussion will focus on the content and application of the laws discussed. Let's discuss a scenario on how basic legal concepts could come into play during a local planning commission meeting in a fictional situation. Harvey and Kathy were recently appointed to the planning commission due to their civic involvement and strong roots in the community. Harvey runs a small business in town, and Kathy works at the local bank. The town is known for its friendly atmosphere, good schools, highway access, proximity to large metropolitan cities, and reasonable housing prices. However, the area has experienced some recent growth, and people from larger urban areas have begun to move into town, buying up homes quickly, creating a real estate boom and demand for new housing development and services. Joe, a lifelong resident, puts it, "Used to be you could drive through town in 5 minutes. Now you get stuck sitting at one stoplight for 15. An out-of-town development company has proposed a 40-acre innovative development on the existing Jaeger farm on the outskirts of town, adjacent to the
We've lost the audio, Carrie.
development in a traditional village design. The meeting room was packed with residents concerned about all the rapid change occurring around town and the influx of new residents. Reactions were quite varied to the plans presented. Jim, a resident from an older nearby neighborhood, spoke on behalf of his neighbors who were concerned the character of the area was changing rapidly, and they have not been given the opportunity for meaningful input. The whole process is rigged and a violation of due process since everybody knows how the vote will eventually go anyway, he said. He expressed that there should be a moratorium on all new development to slow things down. He expressed that there should be a moratorium on all new development to slow things down. Later in the meeting, Kathy spoke and said she liked the open space plan, but wasn't sure all that open space would stay that way and not be developed in the future. Thomas, another planning commissioner, then said, "We can just require all that land to be preserved along the river like we've done in the past." Larry, a local farmer and planning commission member, added, "That would be a taking to require a developer to give up land like that along the river, right?" Harvey wanted none of it. "We're a rural community. Putting houses so close together makes us look like the big city. We need larger lot sizes to spread out development, not houses all crammed together. What's zoning for anyway if we get this kind of development?" The planning commission chair then spoke up and said, "This is all very interesting, but we've never had any of those different kinds of development in town before. Can we even do that with our zoning rules, or will we have to change them?" Janet, the attorney for the developer, then spoke up and said legislative changes to the state's Enabling Act last year require communities to provide for open space options to traditional development. A recent court case and Attorney General's opinion have clarified how communities are to address the new law and the local ordinances not in compliance. At this point, Harvey and Kathy, while very knowledgeable about the community, are puzzled by all this new terminology and questioning their new role. State Enabling Act, Attorney General's opinion, court cases, takings, due process, moratorium, open space development requirements. These terms and their application to the everyday role of a planning official can be overwhelming at times. We will take a closer look at some of these basic legal concepts and how they apply to the role of the planning official. Welcome to Chapter 2, How Planning Officials Are Empowered. Each state has laws referred to as enabling statutes, which enable or authorize local planning and zoning. These statutes can outline basic responsibilities, membership, and compensation for planning bodies. They also describe the purpose, process, and steps for adopting and amending comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances. But these enabling statutes are just the beginning. It's important to read these statutes and understand how they apply to your role. Can you locate the part of your own state enabling statutes that identify how many members should be on the planning commission? Remember, enabling legislation varies by state. In New Jersey, for example, a planning board may have 7 or 9 members. In Colorado, a municipal planning commission may have no less than 5 members and no more than 7 members. It is important to note that not every state uses the term Enabling Act to identify the authority for planning and zoning. Check with your local authority to make sure that you're understanding the key legislation that affects planning and zoning within your state. Some history and background on the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act and later Standard City Planning Enabling Act will help provide a little more perspective on their importance and influence yet today. During the early 1920s, then Secretary of Commerce and later President Herbert Hoover appointed a legislative body to develop standard zoning and planning regulations and guidelines for the states. By the time zoning was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1926, the Standard Zoning Enabling Act had already been passed by most states in the country. The impact was significant and still shapes much of planning and zoning today. During a time of rapid growth in the United States in the 1920s, the newly enacted zoning enabling statutes provided guidance for content and procedures of local development controls. The Standard State Zoning Enabling Act delegated power to zone, established procedures for amendments, special exceptions, and variances, and created the Board of Adjustment, also known as the Zoning Board of Appeals in some states. One key provision outlined in Section 3 of the Enabling Act states, such regulations shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan. This is perhaps the key phrase used by many state enabling statutes and local units of government to tie local zoning to the comprehensive plan. Other key sections with common language found in state enabling statutes include granting a power for the purpose of promoting health, safety, morals, or the general welfare of the community. The legislative body is empowered to regulate height, size of buildings, density, and the location and use of buildings. Districts. The local legislative body may divide the municipality into districts and regulate the use of buildings, structures, and land. Method of procedure. The legislative body shall provide for the manner in which such regulations and restrictions and the boundaries of such districts shall be determined, established, and enforced. The Standard City Planning Enabling Act, published shortly after the Zoning Enabling Act, defines a master plan and covers topics such as the organization and power of the Planning Commission, which was directed to prepare and adopt a master plan, the content and adoption of the master plan, control of private subdivision of land, and the establishment of a regional planning commission and a regional plan. Keep in mind that in most states, home rule authority is delegated to local units of government through statute or their state constitution, allowing them to exercise broad powers, while in other states, more authority is retained at the state level with a prescriptive delegation of certain zoning powers. These are important distinctions to understand for each specific state. Welcome to Chapter 3, Constitutional Law. When people talk about constitutional law, they are talking about the basic laws that establish the operation of government. At the federal level, the U.S. Constitution establishes how states exist and the relationship between states and the federal government. Then each state's constitution establishes the structure for the state government and the relationship with local governments. You probably remember learning about the U.S. Constitution in high school. However, you may not be familiar with how the state and federal constitution affect everyday decision-making on local land use decisions. For example, everyone involved in local decision-making has heard about property rights and takings. This is outlined in the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. How these concepts affect land use is embedded in the state and U.S. constitutions. Let's discuss a few examples of how the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution can affect local land use decision-making. The most obvious example is for development projects that may require the government to purchase private property for a public use, but without the consent of the property owner. This power is known as eminent domain and is used sparingly by local governments to acquire land for public uses such as roadways, utilities, parks, and other public development projects. The eminent domain power only comes into play when the property owner does not willingly sell the property to the government agency. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution requires that just compensation be provided to the property owner in these circumstances. It's important to note that there has been considerable debate among the states as to what constitutes a public use under the Fifth Amendment. Most states have refined these definitions under the respective state constitutions or statutes. Another important component under the Fifth Amendment related to land use is the concept of takings. Takings can occur either if the government occupies the land or puts in place regulations that have the same effect as taking the land for public use without just compensation. The courts have consistently stated that a private property owner should not be asked to bear a disproportionate burden for something that is intended to benefit the public at large. The private property concept of exclusive possession is at the heart of the takings discussion. If through government action, there is the equivalent of occupying private property or denying the property owner all economically beneficial use of their property through regulations that go too far, then a taking is likely to have occurred. A local government regulation can also be challenged as a temporary taking. One example of how this could occur is through a moratorium on development. In some circumstances, the courts have reasoned that temporarily depriving property owners their rights can have the same effect as other takings when the land is reduced to having no development potential. In the 1987 U.S. Supreme Court case of First English Evangelical Lutheran Church of Glendale versus County of Los Angeles, the court found that an interim ordinance temporarily preventing construction in a flood zone was vague and did not set a time frame to allow the property owner to rebuild after a flood, resulting in temporary damages. However, in 2002, U.S. Supreme Court revisited the issue of temporary takings in Tahoe Sierra Preservation Council versus Tahoe Regional Planning Association. Development was halted around Lake Tahoe for 32 months while a regional plan to regulate development was completed. The court ruled that a taking had not occurred because landowners had not been completely deprived of all economically viable use of their land. As these cases highlight, the issue of takings is complex. As these cases highlight, the issue of takings is a complex subject and impact many areas of local land use planning. Many local government decisions related to land use may be challenged on constitutional grounds. Land use decision makers will often face accusations of violations of these constitutions. Another claim based in the Constitution is that of unequal treatment, where one person alleges that the government treated them particularly harshly in light of how they might have treated someone else in a similar situation. This would be a challenge to the 14th Amendment, which requires government to treat people impartially, not favoring one group of people or another due to race, socioeconomic status, or religion, for example. This is one reason it is important for you to understand the basic concepts of constitutional law. Another important concept under the 14th Amendment is the right of due process of law. The amendment reads in part, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." This applies to the function of the planning official in two important ways. Substantive due process protects against arbitrary governmental action by requiring that a regulation promote health, safety, or general welfare by rational means. For example, local zoning regulations must advance a legitimate governmental interest. Procedural due process insists that the government meet a minimum standard of fairness before making decisions affecting the property interests of individual landowners. Generally, procedural due process requires 5 things: a proper notice that a decision affecting your property interest will be made, a hearing that provides you an opportunity to present your position and evidence in support of it, and to hear the position and evidence of others. Standards or impartial criteria on which the government will base its decisions. A record of the proceeding that reflects the government's reason for its decisions and the information it relied on. And finally, decision makers who are free from bias and conflict of interest. The property interests affected dictate how these requirements are applied. A tip from an expert is offered by Cheryl Tolley, a former Kent County, Michigan Planning Commission chair. She notes a careful reading of your own zoning ordinance and master plan is the first step in gaining knowledge of the terms and special vocabulary used in planning and zoning issues. And the key concept that no good deed goes unpunished. Cheryl notes that from her municipal attorney, if you try to bend the rules to do a quote good deed, it'll come back to haunt you. Oftentimes, bending these rules will end up in court cases where unfair treatment, 14th Amendment violations are noted, and other violations may occur. An important legal concept is noted in the 5th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This concept is also embedded in state constitutions. You can locate and read your state's constitution online at the following web address. Welcome to Chapter 4, State and Federal Statutes and Land Use. Within the authorities established under the U.S. and state constitutions, state legislatures may pass state laws or statutes that will directly affect the exercise of local planning and zoning authority. The list of statutes by state is lengthy, but here are 2 examples. The Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act in Michigan specifies that local planning and zoning cannot be used to regulate landfills, for example, through planning and zoning authority. In Arizona, the Private Property Rights Protection Act requires that, subject to certain exceptions, compensation be paid to any property owner whose land suffers a reduction in value as a result of the adoption of a land use regulation. This act requires, subject to certain exceptions, that property owners be paid compensation if a local land use regulation diminishes the value of the property. In addition to the state statutes that affect how local governments can regulate land use, there are also federal statutes that address certain land uses. One example is cell towers are regulated under the Federal Telecommunications Act. The Telecommunications Act contains limits that can be imposed by local zoning. Churches are regulated under the Federal Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Certain federal and state statutes may provide total exclusions from local zoning controls, such as schools in some municipalities in some states. It's important to understand these exceptions that are embedded in state statutes outside of the enabling legislation in the respective states. Here's a quick tip for you to consider. Under the Federal Telecommunications Act, which we've discussed, check your ordinance. What does your ordinance say about cell towers? Are the restrictions acceptable under the federal law? The primary impact on local zoning authority under the Telecommunications Act is that the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless facilities cannot unreasonably discriminate among providers of functionally equivalent services or prohibit the provision of wireless services in general, and governments must act on requests within a reasonable period of time. Also remember, the list of land uses that are preempted by each state and excluded from local zoning control can be quite extensive. Outright preemption occurs if the regulation of a particular land use is reserved to the state. This list changes with technology and as new uses appear on the landscape. One example is wind energy systems. Some states limit the local regulation of utility scale wind energy altogether, or specific components such as wind energy power transmission lines. It's a good idea when updating your local zoning ordinance, check with local and state officials to determine if uses listed in the ordinance have changed or been preempted by state or federal authority. Welcome to Chapter 5, Statutes and Local Government Functions. There are several state statutes that set guidelines for the operation of local governments. The planning enabling statutes in each state set some of the guidelines for these functions. In addition, local officials are also affected by other state statutes that are not related to planning and zoning. For example, Freedom of Information laws and Open Meetings Act laws affect the function of local planning and zoning. These are referred to as sunshine laws because they shine the light on local governance operation. The various state extension offices and municipal associations provide regular training on the operation and application of these important laws. So how does your state's Freedom of Information Act affect planning officials? For example, in Michigan, the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, is also subject to local zoning maps and texts, as well as electronic communication, including social media that may be related to a decision at the local level. In addition, under this act, a local FOIA coordinator must be identified that will accept and process FOIA requests. A tip from the expert is offered by John Amrine, a Michigan State University Extension educator and public policy specialist who is an expert on FOIA and public policy practices. John notes that the Open Meetings Act requires that all public deliberations and decisions take place at meetings that are open to the public. The Act also outlines the process for posting notices and keeping minutes, and it defines the limited situations in which a public body can deliberate in a closed session. A good rule of thumb under the Open Meetings Act is that any person has a right to attend any planning commission meeting at any time unless the meeting is declared to fall under one of the statutory exceptions. This is a general rule, of course. The combination of law, court interpretations, and attorney general opinions will dictate the exact course for the public body to follow. It's important to note that the Open Meetings Act applies to all governmental bodies. For example, those empowered by state constitution, statute charter, ordinances, resolution, or rule to exercise governmental authority. It generally does not apply to corporations, nonprofits, churches, or the like. Remember, the public has a right to address the public body within the parameters of the rules and guidelines established by the unit of government as well. These guidelines should be written as part of the Planning Commission bylaws or similar documents. Key provisions should also be printed or posted within the meeting agenda to inform the public on appropriate opportunities to be heard. Chance social gatherings or conferences attended by multiple members of the Planning Commission may be appropriate as long as they are not intended to avoid the Open Meetings Act. However, official business or deliberation on pending petitions should not be discussed at these events. Keep in mind that the appearance of a violation of the Open Meetings Act while attending events will be met with suspicion from the public. Make certain to know the limits outlined by your state's Open Meetings Act. Some further examples of items often outlined in the Open Meetings Act include subcommittee meetings, this involves situations where a subcommittee from the Planning Commission may be meeting to decide on alternatives or details to share with the full Planning Commission later. Even though there is not a quorum present, in some states, the Attorney General has determined that these types of meetings violate the Open Meetings Act. The advanced timeline requirements, along with details for rescheduled meetings, is often a requirement that is spelled out. Meeting minutes. Requirements include details such as the date, time, place, members present and absent, any decisions made, including roll call votes. Details of these meetings may be required by other statutes as well, depending on the type of meeting or decision. Overall, the Planning Commission and planning official must not only meet the minimum requirements of open meetings for the public, but strive to enhance effective public engagement throughout the planning process. This is really the cornerstone for building public trust and allowing for diversity of ideas and opinions to enhance development decisions. Welcome to Chapter 6, Case Law. Case law refers to the body of law created by judges in state and federal courts that interpret state constitutions, federal constitutional law, and statutes. For planning and zoning, this refers to judicial law that interprets local regulations and ordinances related to planning and zoning. But which court decisions are relevant to your community? This can often be a difficult question to answer. A general rule of thumb is that state Supreme Court and U.S. Supreme Court decisions will set precedents on local planning and zoning decisions. Additionally, the published opinions of state and federal appellate courts will also set precedents for the communities within their respective jurisdictions. Remember that decisions made by lower state or county courts only set precedent for those communities that are located within their jurisdiction. You can find a great deal of information online about state and federal courts. The National Center for State Courts maintains a list of all state courts and relevant links to state court information. When researching court decisions online, you will find that some are published decisions and others are unpublished. So what exactly does that mean? Links to both federal and state courts are provided. When you're researching court decisions online, you will find that some are published decisions and others are unpublished. A published opinion of court has precedential effect, meaning that a court must follow the decision of that legal topic in future decisions. An unpublished decision may be influential, but is not binding on the court to follow the legal logic followed in the previous court case. A party to a court which cites an unpublished opinion must provide a copy to the court and the opposing party with a citation and brief on where it appears. Every law student and practicing attorney must be able to find, interpret, and analyze case law. This is also an important skill for planners to understand how to use effectively. For published court cases, remember that the courts must follow the precedent established on previous cases on the same planning legal topic. Therefore, finding cases is essential to finding out what the current state of the law is. These can be found in both published and in online sources. Now let's take a look at how you can read a citation. A case citation consists of a volume number, an abbreviation of the title of the book or other item, and a page number. In this example, US is the abbreviation for United States Reports, one place where Supreme Court opinions are published. When the same case is printed in different books, citations to more than one book may be given. These additional citations are known as parallel citations. In the parallel citation example, this means that the case you would find at page 565 of volume 44 of the Supreme Court Reporter, published by West, will be the same case you find on page 1016 of volume 68 of Lawyer's Edition, published by Lexis, and both will be the same as the opinion you will find in the official government version, United States Reports. Although the text of the opinion will be the same, The added editorial material will differ by publisher. Now it's time for a knowledge question. Young versus American Mini Theaters, Inc. is an important zoning case. Which court rendered the decision, and to what reporter does this citation refer? It was a U.S. Supreme Court decision decided in 1976. The case is reported in the Supreme Court Reporter. You will find it in the United States Reports and the Lawyer's Edition. Remember, the goal here is not to make every planning official a lawyer, but to be able to understand and recognize some of the key legal concepts, such as case law, that affect planning decisions. As Supreme Court Justice William Brennan famously wrote in a case involving land use regulations in San Diego Gas and Electric Company versus City of San Diego in 1981, if a policeman must know the Constitution, then why not a planner? This statement highlights the need for planning commissioners to have a basic understanding of laws and regulations that govern and guide their decision-making. Seeking the legal advice of the municipal attorney and following sound planning practices recommended by a professional planner are key concepts to risk management and good planning decisions.
Now, I will note on that, no one here needs to know how to read or understand a Supreme Court citation. That is staff's job to deal with that stuff, should it come up. And I have not, as of yet, had to deal with the Supreme Court decision in our local decisions.
Chapter 7, Common Law. Common law may be the most elusive of all the laws that we will discuss here today. Yet, fortunately, its application is quite simple. Common law is a system of laws and principles based on judicial precedents rather than on constitutional or state statutes. This means that the law that we just discussed becomes part of the common law that judges use when making court decisions. In fact, much of the common law in the United States is derived from our colonizer, Great Britain. Often legal discussions will refer to common law principles to form much of the body of case law principles. Two common law principles that are central to planning and zoning practice are nuisance and police power. Nuisance law refers to the judicial authority that one landowner may cause to harm that of another landowner. Police power refers to the government authority to regulate public health, safety, and welfare. Much of local zoning authority derives from these two common law principles. In the granddaddy of zoning cases in the village of Euclid, Ohio versus Amber Realty Company, Justice Sutherland states, "A nuisance may be merely a right thing in the wrong place, like a pig in the parlor instead of the barnyard. If the validity of the legislative classification for zoning proposed to be fairly debatable, the legislative judgment must be allowed to control." In Village of Euclid, Ohio versus Ambler Realty Company, decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1926, the concept of local zoning was officially legalized by the highest court in the land for the first time. The validity of local government's exercise of the police power was deemed to be constitutional if it bears a rational relationship to promoting the public health, safety, and welfare. A properly constructed zoning ordinance is therefore a legitimate exercise of local police power. In the early part of the 20th century, increased urbanization called for new means to address nuisance issues, such as conflicts between industrial and residential uses related to public health concerns and overcrowding. 40 years before this case was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, the Village of Euclid, a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, enacted an ordinance to restrict the placement of land uses, such as residential and industrial, along with building requirements for each type of use. The Ambler Realty Company owned a considerable amount of land in the village. Ambler was impacted by the zoning that classified some of its land as multiple family residential and industrial use. The area in question was in the vicinity of railroad tracks and industrial uses. Ambler claimed the ordinance was unconstitutional and severely diminished the market value of their property with the residential classification. They made the argument that the ordinance was a violation of due process and equal protection under the U.S. Constitution. Euclid, a small village under 10,000 in population at the time, was experiencing new growth and development and needed a new way to regulate uses. The Anglers argued the ordinance placed a cloud upon the land that had the effect of diverting normal industrial, commercial, and residential development to other less favorable locations. The court held Euclid's zoning ordinance was a valid exercise of the police power. In order for the village to exclude businesses from residential districts, the court added there must be a rational relation to health and safety of the community. Examples given by the court included health and security by separating houses from trade and industry, street traffic, and prevention of disorder. It's important to note that the validity of the entire zoning ordinance was challenged, not just the parcels in question in the Euclid case. However, the court cautioned that the governmental power to interfere by zoning regulations with the general rights of landowners by restricting uses cannot be imposed if it does not bear a substantial relation to the public health, safety, or general welfare. It's interesting to note that New York City adopted the first comprehensive zoning law 10 years earlier in 1916, and some states had rejected the validity of local zoning before Euclid. During the 1920s, along with the decision in this landmark Supreme Court case, communities quickly embraced the zoning scheme enacted by Euclid, and it remains the dominant form of zoning in use throughout the U.S. today. This might be a good time to distinguish between the concept of the police power and nuisance law as mentioned in Euclid. While the U.S. Supreme Court uses nuisance law as an example for upholding the constitutionality of zoning, nuisance law is often used when legislative controls are absent. Public nuisances affect the rights of the public, while private nuisances affect individual property owners. A nuisance case that preceded Euclid is Hadachek versus Sebastian, decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1950. The court upheld a local land use law that prevented the operation of a brick kiln in the city of Los Angeles. Even though the industry was established before the residential neighborhood moved into the area, the court found industry to be a nuisance since it was in the path of development. This practice is sometimes referred to as judicial zoning when it is done by the courts outside the scheme of Euclid-type zoning. Today, many public nuisances are controlled through land, water, and air statutes rather than relying on common law nuisance claims. One example is right to farm statutes or similar measures adopted in states that offer some level of protection to farms if residential development encroaches and neighbors complain about the noise and smell of the farming practices that pre-existed the residential development. All U.S. states, except Louisiana, have legal systems based on common law. However, many states have codified common law. That is, they have chosen to develop statutes that put that information into a state statute as the basis for planning and zoning. Similarly, governments may choose to pass statutes that modify or reject common law principles. An example of this might be a nuisance violation that results in a noise ordinance. Louisiana, because it was a French colony, developed a system based on civil law. In a civil law system, the laws used by the courts are based on statute rather than judicial precedent. Chapter 8, Attorney General Opinions. Every state has an Attorney General who serves as the most senior lawyer of the state. One role of state attorneys general is to give opinions of laws requested by state officials. Only the governor, state legislatures, or state officials can ask the Attorney General for opinions. An Attorney General opinion is a statement of law that officials must follow until the state legislature or courts overrule it. One example related to planning and zoning, where an attorney's general opinion may be helpful, is if a new law is passed and an interpretation helps identify how that law relates to another law where there might be some inconsistencies. Check with your attorney general's opinion to help clarify some of the existing laws that may exist related to planning and zoning within your state. A helpful reading discussion is from the National Association of Attorneys General. Attorney general opinions are available online. You can search for attorney general opinions on various topics. For more information on your respective state's attorney general, please visit the website below. It is probably an appropriate time to bring in a local attorney for advice if you find a land use issue where there is uncertainty between local regulations, case law, or an attorney general's opinion. As Brad Newman, Michigan State University Extension Specialist, notes in an article on this topic, no one is eager to call a doctor or an attorney. It often means something is wrong and money will be spent. But like the adage that sometimes a cough is not just a cold, local planning and zoning officials must be able to recognize the signs that legal help is needed. However, not every zoning decision requires an attorney, but planning officials should not be hesitant to involve an attorney when they do not feel confident in their understanding of the law at issue. As with medical care, waiting to seek advice can cost much more in the long run than early intervention. Your attorney should be contacted anytime the municipality receives notice of a lawsuit, formal dispute resolution process, or before initiating legal action to enforce the zoning ordinance. It is also a good practice to contact your attorney when considering any proposed ordinance or amendment to an ordinance before it is adopted, deliberating complex or controversial rezonings, special use permits, site plan reviews, and plan unit developments, discussing total exclusion of a particular land use from the ordinance, justifying an impact fee, exaction, or dedication for development costs, encountering questions or resident complaints about complying with the Open Meetings Act, and realizing that any behavior by a local official has become inappropriate, reckless, or vindictive towards an applicant or others involved in the development review process. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but more common situations in which you and the local government should seek out further consultation from a municipal attorney competent in planning and zoning law. Welcome to Chapter 9. Why know all this? While the body of law that affects planning and zoning is quite large, it all exists within the arena that we just discussed. In addition to understanding the law and where to look for the law, applying the law consistently is an effective tool for risk management. Keep in mind that attorneys often specialize, and not all municipal attorneys are specialized in land use law. Similar to divorce or contract law, land use law is very complex and is often changing. You may want to ask a local attorney what their experience is specifically with land use law and land use cases. Let's take a look at the reading discussion. The role of the lawyer. This information comes from an article in Planning Commissioner's Journal from the author Carol Baldwin. The role of the lawyer. Remember, when an attorney goes before the Planning Commission, they are representing their client. They will be presenting certain information and facts. It's important to listen carefully and ask important questions as follow-up to be able to dig deeper into the nature of their position. But a lawyer's interpretation of a particular section of your ordinance may differ from yours or how the community has viewed this in the past. So make sure that your decisions are based on the law and regulations within your ordinance. It's important to be clear and concise in the motions that you will be approving. Courts do not overturn local decisions lightly that are based on the local plans and regulations. Lawyers can also be members of the Planning Commission. Of course, they must represent the community in which they're appointed and cannot serve as an advocate for the applicant. However, attorneys can also serve to help streamline some of the processes and procedures and help to raise some questions on perhaps some of the legal jargon that might be presented by the opposing attorney before the planning commission. The commission should have access to the municipality's legal counsel when there's a legal question that arises. Some may complain that this is very expensive. However, it's oftentimes much more expensive to defend a bad decision that could have been avoided with good consultation. Also, keep in mind, when a legal question arises, it may be prudent to postpone the decision on that particular matter until you've been able to seek legal counsel to clarify your questions. Legal opinions are not subject to FOIA and should be marked appropriately so they're not inadvertently released. On the other hand, a well-crafted legal opinion that clarifies the ordinance or decision may be beneficial to help forestall or avoid a lawsuit. Always consult your FOIA coordinator before withholding or releasing a legal opinion. Chapter 10. Now it's time for an activity. Based on the discussion of this course, when you identify the source of the basic planning and zoning law, use this activity to test where you might look for answers to these specific questions. You have learned that your county is preparing to build a new county garage in your community. The plans do not comply with your zoning ordinance. Can your community enforce its zoning ordinance in this situation? The answer depends.
Do you guys want to take the questions as they come this time?
Sure.
All right, so I'll flip back to that just so you can see it.
I say yes, we can enforce our zoning code.
I would agree.
What's the answer?
I would agree.
I hope so.
I would say I agree unless it's in one of the areas which is exempt from the city's zoning ordinance. So if a school district did it, because schools, universities like UC Berkeley, that whole thing with the student housing stuff, they're under the division of the state architect and they're exempt, or a state-owned property or a county-owned property. So that's, I don't know if there are other instances.
The answer depends. You need to check your state's zoning enabling statutes, other relevant statutes, and court decisions to see if this particular land use is covered by any of those previously adopted court decisions or statutes. A member of your planning commission has raised a question about who must be notified in the event of a rezoning. You should check your state's zoning enabling legislation to see if this is spelled out, or if there's an attorney general opinion with further clarification.
And for that one, we have adopted what's required in our local zoning ordinance, so all you need to do is go there, so. And that generally, just so that you're aware, and we do have a zoning amendment coming to you in a little bit. The requirement is not just, it's everyone in the zoning district and the 600-foot radius to those properties. If the number is beyond a certain number of properties, then it can be done via newspaper notification. Now,
Is it everyone in the like contiguous zoning district, or if the zoning district, you know, if we have, you know, whatever, R4 and there's like a pocket of R4 that's not contiguous to the property, is it like every R4 or whatever?
well, if it's a zoning, not a map amendment, but a zoning of what would be allowed. So say for R4, you say we're gonna allow duplex and triplexes in the zone, we're gonna change your code. Then everyone who's in those districts.
Got it.
Because they're,
Yeah.
you know, when they go back to the property rights, their rights are being impacted on what they can and can't do.
The attorney for a petitioner has referenced a court case that she says supports her client's position. Do not always take comments from petitioners or their representatives on faith. Ask for the specific case site or get a copy and refer this on to your municipal attorney. Your municipal attorney has suggested a change in your planning commission's operating procedures based on their reading of the law.
The answer to that is yes, we change it.
Ask your attorney which law is being used to support the change. Is this under state statute, the enabling acts, or perhaps the attorney general's opinion? Ask for clarification. Your zoning ordinance prohibits the siting of cell towers in some areas. Is this in compliance with federal law?
This is an issue I'm always glad we do have our attorney present when we talk about telecommunications.
Right. So it's difficult to prohibit towers. What we have done with our code is we have actually expressed a preference for locations, and they would have to first say why those wouldn't work for them, you know, based on the coverage or whatever it is they're working on. And those include first siting in industrial areas, then commercial areas, and then, you know, around schools and residential areas last.
You will need to check limitations spelled out within the Federal Telecommunications Act to see if the process and restrictions that you put in place are legal under federal statute. Now you should be able to identify how local planning officials are empowered, identify types of law which a local planning official must be familiar, and identify how local planning officials manage risk associated with the planning process. This concludes Course 6 of Planning Commissioner Training. For more information about Planning Commissioner Training and becoming a Master Citizen Planner, check out the website below.
All right, any questions? This was actually, I hope John was watching this one, because this is actually a really good refresher even for me on some of this. All right, yeah, don't forget that.
Yeah, I guess I'll just reiterate that I'm happy when we do have a complicated issue that we do have outside attorney availability, because sometimes some of these things can get very complicated and we obviously do not have, you know, the legal background on the commission to know exactly what to refer to or what the law is.
Right, yeah. And if we don't, and you feel like we have some questions that you want answered, of course, as you noted, you can always continue a hearing so that we can get an opinion or, you know, anything like that as needed and get that presented to you. All right, well, if that is it for that, we can.
You're
move on.
muted, Kathy, if you're trying to talk.
I found my agenda and it says next is subcommittee updates. Do we have any? I'll say that I did send a copy of my notes to Carrie following the Libby Park. If there's anything else that anyone wanted to add to that, I just had what I could figure out from my scribbling and what I managed to get down on paper.
Yes, thank you. And we will turn those along with my notes and John notes in 2 minutes. That'll come before you at a next meeting.
Okay.
And come to think of it, right before this meeting, I did get a public comment for an item not on the agenda, and it was about Libby Park. Just in general, so I will forward that to the commission because that's particularly timely, I thought.
No other subcommittee reports, then the planning director's report, please.
Okay, so we had actually, John, do you want to report on the items into council most recently? Since you presented them, most of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So we had the level of service report that was at the last meeting, and the recent one that we had was a municipal code amendment to our coin op play devices, which was in regards to the Rewind Barcade. There was a section of the code that actually prohibits minors under the age of 21 in a coin op or arcade facility where alcohol is being served. So that was buried deep within our business license section, and we did not notice that when we were going through the entitlement phase. So that was presented for its first reading last week to City Council, and then is scheduled next week for the second meeting. And then if City Council adopts that resolution, then it'll be 30 days before that's enacted.
Right, and so
I
that's
think that's it.
striking the line of the fact that you can't have that. It's an odd section, and that it, yeah, as John said, it's in the business license. And I had actually searched for arcades, but it's not called arcade, it's called coin operated play devices. It's that old. So we did catch it afterwards, and because it's not in the zoning ordinance, it did not need to go through the commission. And John and I both felt, well, they were very supportive of the project, so they're clearly not going to have an issue with this. So we took it directly to council. Again, if it was in the zoning ordinance, we would have had to come back to you, but hopefully we would have caught it at that point, since that's our section of the code. Adam was at the council meeting, and it was very encouraging for him there, as well as at the planning commission. So the first reading was unanimously supported.
How do you find something like that? It wasn't under what you were looking for.
I was looking for some other fee-related thing. When I saw it, I wasn't even looking for anything about it. I was literally totally looking for something else. So, you do the best you can, and sometimes you miss stuff. I missed something. So, fortunately, it was a fairly easy process, and it was a pretty easy ordinance to get together into them. A couple things that are going to the next city council, as John noted, the second reading for that is next Tuesday. That'll just be on the consent calendar. And then we also have a request from the community church to waive the use permit fees, the 100% of the fees for the micro shelters up at the community church. And so staff is supportive of that, and it's actually on the consent calendar as well. I don't think it'll be an issue, but that's going to them next Tuesday. The fee waiver is for about $1,200 or so for that. And then we did receive an appeal of the Saves RV Village, and that will be going to City Council on November 15th. And so that I think is the only planning department item. Other items of interest, next Tuesday, I believe there's a ordinance regarding police surveillance equipment, and I apologize, I don't know the details of that, but that is on there. And then just in terms of other groups, the Public Art Committee is finalizing selection for a new call for artists. They've got a few locations that they're booking at. But they're looking at getting a new call out for that. The Climate Action Committee is going to be putting together a work plan and prioritizing the tasks that are in the Climate Action Framework Appendix A. So that's one of their big tasks. We'll kind of be starting the presentation on that tomorrow, although Phoebe is starting to meet with the working groups to go through each of those sections. And nicely, I'm using the Planning Commission as the example for that. So that'll hopefully be helpful for that. If there are items that come out of that also relate to the Planning Commission, we'll make sure we work those into our work plan. I'm anticipating we'll need to, our last redo of the work plan was a couple of years where we were working on some of the longer range projects like the hazard plan. I'm anticipating with the adoption of the housing element and the climate work being prioritized. Because that's also going to go to council for their approval and assistance with anything they want to move up or down in the priorities. I'm guessing that we'll have to do an amendment or, relook at our route plan this spring, early spring. The housing element. We are in the midst of our 90-day review period. We're hopeful that in the next week or so, we'll have a call with HCD about any concerns they have before they give us their official comments. And we tentatively had to have the housing work plan, general plan amendment hearing will be, I believe, the first meeting in December is what we're targeting right now, assuming everything goes along with schedule in terms of revisions. It's needs to be adopted by January 31st. And so that allows us to get it to council, one of the meetings, probably the first meeting in January for that. So. And the other thing that was on this the city council meeting last Tuesday was and the council signed on and is in support of the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which is mostly larger organizations and trying to get countries to plan for not having new fossil fuel mines and drawing down reserves and transitioning to renewable energies. And I think that's it. Oh, the other thing that has happened, you probably heard about it, is that Governor Newsom is going to be ending the state of emergency, the COVID state of emergency in February. And so we will be working on probably transition to hybrid meetings. The state legislation, there has been some legislation adopted that allows commissioners or council members, the actual board members to call in or be, without having to reveal their home address or location, as was the case before COVID. There are certain circumstances that need to be met for that, just in terms of, I haven't even sorted through it all. So we'll be working on those and making sure we have those logistics worked out. The plan for the planning commission would be to go back to the youth annex, which is a rather large, as you know, it's a rather large room for planning commission most of the time. So we generally have adequate, distancing. I think that's it.
Okay.
John, did I miss anything? Oh,
Not at
John.
all.
Good. All right, excellent. That's it then.
Okay. Then with that, I think can adjourn our meeting tonight. Okay.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Good.
Good night.
Excellent. And
Thank
before
you.
you leave, can we